They lost their lives in a car crash but came back years later.
Jennifer stroked her sister's head in a calming gesture and told her, "The blood is coming out of your eyes. This is where the car had hit." It was all quite uncanny. So, John and Florence grew increasingly convinced that Jennifer and Gillian were actually Jacqueline and Joanna reborn. As the twins grew up, their parents had continued to notice more and more things that seemed to prove their theory. It was May 5, 1957, in the small town of Hexham in England, when a 6-year-old Jacqueline and 11-year-old Joanna were busy walking to church with a friend on what would have been a normal Sunday morning. Sadly, things took a horrifying turn when a desperate woman took the lives of all three of them with her car. However, when all seemed to be over for the Pollock family, the girls' mother got pregnant once again. With her deceased daughters? It was much later discovered that the driver was a local woman driving under the influence and had intentionally hit the children. This was because she was forcibly separated from her own children. The woman was eventually admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The grief-stricken couple wanted absolutely nothing more than to have their girls back, especially their father. But things started getting even stranger when John predicted that they would have another set of girls soon. Everyone thought he was simply speaking out of grief and never really believed him. But John was convinced that Florence would have twin girls. He believed the new babies would be reincarnations of Joanna and Jacqueline. But Florence had been experiencing severe depression caused by the loss of her daughters and did not even believe in reincarnation. Florence even thought the idea of reincarnation went completely against the teachings of their Catholic religion. The two had even fought over John's claims and almost filed for divorce. Even after evidence of this possible reincarnation became increasingly apparent, Florence refused to believe it for several years. However, just as John had willed it, a year later, Florence had given birth to a set of twin girls, which they had named Gillian and Jennifer. It didn't take too long for the parents to start noticing rather unmistakable signs that their prayers had indeed been answered. It was as though the girls did a lot more than just resemble their departed sisters. Even though the twins were identical, they both had very different birthmarks, which is not common with twins. Jennifer had an extremely distinct white line across her forehead in the exact spot where Jacqueline had a scar. She even had the same birthmark as Jacqueline. The twins also began to get introduced to their late sister's toys when they were about 3 years old. From the very start, they could easily identify certain things, name and even organize them as their sisters would, and also describe when they got those toys. For instance, they would refer to those that had been Christmas gifts for Joanna and Jacqueline as special gifts from Santa. They were also reported to have asked for specific toys they had never seen before and that had been stored away after their sister's passing. To make things a lot more interesting, the twins claimed their set of toys, Gillian had claimed Joanna's, while Jennifer had claimed Jacqueline's, without even fighting or arguing. The family then moved to Whitley Bay when the two were still only babies. Then, at age 4, when they had returned to Hexham, Jennifer and Gillian began pointing out landmarks that Jacqueline and Joanna were familiar with. Like the school that they had formerly attended, the girls were also able to correctly name the dolls and stuffed animals that belonged to them in their former lives. Gillian would take care of Jennifer in the same way that Joanna did towards Jacqueline.
Florence Pollock still remained unconvinced for several years that Gillian and Jennifer were reincarnations of her older daughters. But when the twins suddenly began remembering details from the accident, she slowly changed her mind. On at least one occasion, Florence had overheard the girls playing a game and even talking about the accident. Florence had also witnessed Jennifer cradling Gillian's head while she was lying on the floor of the girls' room. The parents even reported another conversation in which Gillian had pointed to her sister's eye birthmark and said something strange along the lines of, "That is the same mark Jennifer had gotten when she fell on a bucket." Florence had refused to believe her deceased daughters had actually reincarnated until she heard all these conversations. The twins also had recurring nightmares about being run over by a car. They seemed to hold an absolutely unjustifiable fear of cars, and, according to their parents, it had reached a PTSD-level type of fear. When they were still very young, the girls would have nightmares about getting hit by a car and would become incredibly anxious whenever they were near one. Their father also remembered a moment in which they heard a car's engine nearby and immediately grabbed onto each other in absolute terror and screamed about how the car was coming to get them. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist, had taken a great interest in the twins, and as soon as he heard about them, he contacted the family. He even wrote about the Pollock twins in his book about reincarnation. But, suddenly, one fine day, everything just changed when the girls turned 5. As they grew up, the twins slowly forgot about their past lives. And after turning 7, they no longer talked about the car incident like they would before, nor did they touch on the topic of many of their previous stories. There are quite a few theories that could explain this story, including the fact that the parents could have been mistaken or were lying. It's also possible that the girls' brothers could have influenced their memories. While this story is based mostly on testimonies and allegations given by Florence and John Pollock, it doesn't take away all the curious coincidences that make it one of the most famous and appealing reincarnation stories to exist.